Hello, my name is Bob Shaver, and I'm just going to discuss a little bit about the equipment I ended up with when hiking the Camino in Spain in 2018, June and July of 2018. You have to bear in mind this season, June and July was maybe had 6 days of overcast, a lot of days of really high heat, and maybe 3 days of sprinkling. I started out with more equipment, but I mailed it home, and this is basically the equipment I ended up with, which worked very well for me. So I'll tell you what I had, and there's no right group of equipment, but if you had this equipment, you wouldn't be too far, you wouldn't be too uncomfortable, and it would work well for you. To start with, I had a 36-liter Osprey pack. It's the Osprey Stratos, and it worked very well. Everything fit in here just fine. A lot of what I have was clothing, and I kind of opted for not the super sparse clothing. I could go for 3 days before I had to wash clothes. So what I had for clothing is 2 pairs of short top socks, and they're kind of a thick hiking sock, and this is a medium pair of hiking socks, and this is a thick, tall hiking sock. There were some cold mornings and some cold evenings. The long hiking sock felt very good. I wouldn't do without it. So 4 pairs of socks. I also had 3 pairs of underwear. If I were getting set up to go, I would have one of these underwear that I'd wear, and then I'd carry 2. I also had 2 synthetic t-shirts, and they are short sleeve t-shirts. I also had a short sleeve synthetic shirt, button up the front, and I had a long sleeve nylon shirt, which I guess I don't have here. So I had a total of 4 shirts. 4 shirts. Also had a pair of shorts and a pair of zip-off nylon pants. I would wear one or the other, but not both, obviously. And a belt. And very importantly, I had a handkerchief, because I got a cold along the way. I was blowing my nose a lot. I would wipe my face with this to keep it somewhat neat and tidy. And this thing was, I'd also put it over my camera. If it was super hot and I was dripping sweat, I'd put this over my camera to absorb some of the sweat. So I'd definitely take this again. As far as cameras go, a lot of people have a cell phone. I had a cell phone, which is taking the movie right now. Also had this camera. The camera weighs about 1.5 pounds. It's a very good camera. Sony A6000. It's as good as a lot of digital single lens reflex cameras, but it's quite a bit smaller. It's a mirrorless camera, which allows it to be quite a bit smaller. I also carried one extra lens, a 35mm lens. The lens I used most of the time was a 10 to 18 zoom. This is a 35mm fixed, which would be good for portraits or close-ups or things like that, macros. I had a toiletries kit which has an absorbent towel. If you're in an albergue that doesn't supply towels, you need something to dry off with, and that is sufficient. It's better than nothing. I also carried a little bit of toilet paper because I didn't want to be stuck out in the boonies and have to go. I never had to use it a bit, but it's kind of nice to know that I could have. I had, this is a tube of deodorant. I talked to people when I was on the Camino that they went 30 or 40 days without a shower and without deodorant. And I'm going, why? Don't do that. You have, wherever you are, you get a hot shower every night. You have electricity every night. You have a bed to sleep in. It's a pretty cush trip as far as the amenities go. I got a tube of shampoo, and I have a toothbrush. This toothbrush folds out, has a little tube of toothpaste in the handle, and that was enough to last for 30 days. Little pair of scissors with a case. There's a lot of scissors around that don't have a case. They're always punching holes in your stuff sack. So that's kind of handy for whatever you want to cut. Dental floss. Hairbrush. Fingernail file, because when you get a split nail, you have to trim it up or it just keeps splitting and gets worse. And I had a little razor for whatever might need to be shaved, and fingernail trimmers, which I used several times. Somebody in the party has to have fingernail trimmers. So that's the toiletries. Now, a lot of people, more than half the people on the Camino, have hiking poles that possibly extend out and telescope. I started the trip with hiking poles, and when we started the trip, we started in Saint-Jean, Port. It was raining, and I bought an umbrella in Saint-Jean, and I also bought rain pants, and the rain pants were something I sent back, and when we got to Pamplona, I sent them back, and the hiking poles, because if it was raining, I was going to be using the umbrella, not the hiking poles. And there are very few places on the Camino where you need hiking poles for stability or even for power going uphill. I do a lot of backpacking, and I would not go on a backpack without hiking poles. However, I don't use them on flat ground, and I don't use them on pavement. So they're for steep uphill, steep downhill, and crossing streams. So I would definitely recommend taking an umbrella, and there aren't many people on the Camino using an umbrella. And I had 3 stuff sacks. This is one of my stuff sacks. This one has electronics in it. You need one of these, which plugs into the wall circuit in Spain and Europe. And on the back side it has 2 USB ports. And in the 2 USB ports I could plug in my camera battery charger and my cell phone. So I had cables for those, and I also had a storage battery, which I could have skipped this. It's a heavy little sucker, and you have electricity every night, so if you're careful, you won't run out of electricity. So that's one stuff sack. It's all my electronics. Okay, my other stuff sack, another one here, is first aid stuff. And I had a little bag of pills, which is Advil, Motrin, aspirin, various types of over-the-counter pills. And this one is safety pins, suture kit, 4x4 bandages, and some tape. And this one was a pack that was full at one time. When I started off, it was totally full of little individual baggies which have the meds I take every day. So every day I'd haul one of these out, take a bunch of meds. By the end of the trip, it was practically empty. It should have been totally empty, I suppose. Of this first aid stuff, I didn't use any of it. I also had a round of antibiotics. I'm a diabetic, so I'm kind of afraid of having an infected blister. An infected blister is bad news for a diabetic. So I had the antibiotics, which I would have used if I had to. I never got a blister. I never got an infection, so I didn't have to use that. My third stuff sack has a puffy. This is a Montbell jacket, a down jacket. I didn't have any fleece or any pile or a long sleeve underwear top. I just had this down coat. It's very light, it's crazy expensive. It weighs like 6 ounces, 6.5 ounces. I've used it once or twice, didn't use it a lot, but it was handy to have. Of other stuff, I had a little first aid kit, maybe with more practical stuff, which is moleskin, sewing kit with a needle, Band-Aids, and forceps. I never used the Band-Aid for me, and I never used the other first aid for me, and I rarely do. But you want to have enough that if you're with someone who gets hurt, you have enough stuff to help them, and you can improvise a lot of things in the backcountry or away from roads or away from towns. You can't improvise sterile, so it's good to have some things that are sterile, which I have in my 4x4 pads. This was for blisters, kept it handy, but I never used it. I'm diabetic, so I made this little cold pack. I had 10 tubes of insulin. I had 2 of these boxes. Each box had 5 pens in it. Which was enough insulin for me for 6 weeks. And in this cold pack, I have frozen gel packs. For most nights, I could get those into a freezer somewhere, and I would put the insulin packs in a refrigerator, and that keeps them in good shape. The pack has a thermometer on the outside, so I can tell what the temperature is inside the pack. I also had a test kit, and I did a lot of testing the sugar in my blood, and to know where I was. And because it's so much exercise, I used a lot less insulin than usual, but I tested as much or more than usual so I would know where I stood. I also had a little pack of 2 tubes kept available on a handy pocket. These are the 2 I was using until I used them up, and then I get 2 more. I ended up with 2 packs of paperwork. Whenever you check into a hotel, they want 3 things. They want your passport, for one thing. So, passport's in this bag. They also want a credit card to charge the room. And you want your pilgrim's credential to get it stamped. You get this stamped along the route, and I don't know, could be a collector's item, or if you get 2 stamps a day for the last 100 kilometers, which starts in Sevilla, Spain, you qualify to get a Compostela, which is just a little official statement that says that you did the Camino. And some people like to have that. Just a collector's item, I guess. I also had another bag which had some of my Camino paperwork, like a list of all the albergues and what amenities they have, like ATMs and how many beds and things like that. And I just threw every receipt in here, so this has all my receipts. I really have no reason to have these receipts, but it just got to be a habit, so got the receipts. I wore glasses, and I carried sunglasses. These are the sunglasses, and they fit in the hip belt pocket of my pack very nicely. I also had a Kindle, and on the Kindle I had the contents of a book of cultural history of the Camino, which had about the history of the people, the bridges, the churches, when they were built, all kinds of cultural history. I had the Brierley guidebook, which seemed very handy to me. I used it a lot. And I also had a raincoat. This is an OR raincoat. It's very light. It weighs about 8 ounces. It has a hood, but no pockets. That's partly why it's light, because there's no pockets. Kept that on the outside of the pack, and every day I hiked, because I'm diabetic, I always had some snacks. And I carried a 500 ml bottle of water, about half this size. This is a liter. And that was sufficient. And I found I really didn't drink much water, even on the hot days. Every day when it was hot, and we were dying in the heat, when we got to a town, we'd just have a beer. And if I wasn't having a beer, I would have Nestea, which is a can of sweetened iced tea. It was wonderful. But there were stretches where I I needed some water, but not tons of water. There's fountains all along the way. The fountains will say untreated or treated, or some of them don't say one or the other, but that means they're treated. So that's the equipment I had for the Camino. It totally worked for me.